It's our very first week. Oh, I messed it up in 4 words, guys. Well. I don't start over. I just tell you I'm an idiot and keep on rolling. It's our very first recap was the word that I was attempting to say. The fantasy basketball season is underway. We got 2 games under our belt. Yep, just like a little appetizer, a little snack. Not enough to force us to loosen the aforementioned metaphorical belt, but enough to whet the appetite for a wild, gigantic Wednesday coming up. Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Vespers. Thanks, as always, for tuning in, everybody. Here's the plan for today. This show is going to be about yesterday. This is going to be a Tuesday recap. We're going to talk a lot about how to look at the basketball games because we have the time afforded to us to do it with only 4 teams actually playing last night. There were a few key fantasy things. We're going to focus on those as well. But because it's the first week of the year, normally on a Wednesday, we'd probably do a buy low or a sell high show as the bonus episode in the early afternoon. Mushing the recap and the look ahead all into one edition. But today we're going to split those up. And the reason is when you get into the thick of the year, the dog days, whatever. I mean, honestly, even once you're like 2 weeks in, once you're a couple weeks in, the look ahead becomes way less important. Not unimportant, just less important in as so much as once you're a couple weeks in, you kind of know what the teams are doing. So your look ahead is like, all right, I got injury news I'm waiting on. Is there some sort of small changing of the guard happening with the team? Are there little tweaks? And it's that whole, we've talked about this a lot of times on the show, but under this new Old Man Squad banner, this is the first time I think I'm going to talk about this. The ebb and flow of an NBA season. Fantasy in particular. You have the peaks, which first few days of the season is a peak. Lots of ads and lots of drops that we should be making because there's stuff that analysts missed, myself included. And then, once we know what every team is doing, there's a settling. That's the ebb of the fantasy basketball season. Not a lot of ads and drops that matter. It's mostly streaming. Things are fairly predictable. And then there's a shift. Teams that suck start to try new stuff. Teams that are good try to mush with minutes a little bit, add new plays. Teams adjust to one another. Teams that got off to a hot start, everybody messes with their scouting report. And it goes up and down like this throughout the season. This is a peak. This is an ebb. This is a flow, rather, right now. So the look ahead is of critical importance. That'll be our second show today. Obviously, the recap is important. Every single day, the recap is important. We want to make sure we're making the right moves based on things that we've seen. So let's go ahead and just get straight into it. Quickly here, at Dan Vespers on Twitter. Drop a follow over there. Very important. Hit that like button if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe if you're watching, listening, whatever. Thank you. We're at like 140 Apple reviews already. We're at like 250 Spotify reviews. Again, the astronomical pace that Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball is on is all thanks to you guys. I have fallen behind in the comments. I admit that. Today is also going to be kind of a tough day for me, but I will catch up. You can also follow Old Man Squad on Twitter. That will follow you back. That, believe it or not, I've actually caught up on. So good for me on one side. Just to give you guys an idea of how things are going to work, let's dive in. On the recap part of the show, I'm basically going to give you guys the Basketball Monster recap page. I would strongly recommend this one. It's very simple. It's sort of elegant in its simplicity. You'll see as I scroll down and show things. You can see all the final scores right here at the top of the page. They've got the calendar. There's no ads. There's no fancy stuff. There's nothing bogging down your computer. I had an old computer until last year and was able to handle this website every day very easily, seamlessly. And what's also nice, and I'm not going to do a lot of this sort of across-the-board scrolling, you can see that the color coding is there, so you can kind of get an idea of how the players performed on a given night. And Basketball Monsters box score page organizes the players by the most productive 9 category lines per team. So you can see here, like for instance, if we get into New York at Boston, which was a blowout, for the Knicks, it might not seem that way, but Cat's fantasy line was actually the best 9 Cat line on the team because he shot the ball well, didn't have any turnovers. There were no defensive stats either, but basically just didn't shoot himself in the foot in any part of his fantasy game. It's weird to think that way, and it wasn't a particularly good line overall compared to some of the actual big lines you saw in the night, but it's a really nice way that they organize things, and it allows us to talk about it and not sound like idiots. Very quickly here before we get started, because I'll get in trouble if I don't do it fast. Basketball fans, it's that time of year again. The NBA's back. You know that. From opening tip until the buzzer beater at the end of the ball game, BetOnline has you covered with the best odds, biggest promotions, and live in-game betting on all your favorite teams. This season, every game matters. BetOnline has every stat, matchup breakdown, and live odds to bet on during the games. And it's not just basketball. It's not just NBA. BetOnline has odds on everything from football, baseball playoffs, hockey, political props. They've got it all. Head to the website today. Get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering, BetOnline. The game starts here. Let's talk New York, Boston. This is a blowout. So there isn't a whole lot to take away on the New York side. Cat only playing 24 minutes, and some of it has to do with just when the rotations were going to happen, because Jalen Brunson only played 24 and a half. Same with Josh Hart. Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, who logged more minutes towards the end, say, of the third quarter, they got their minutes up closer to what a full game would look like, where, you know, they had a few minutes in there, but with a unit that was playing a tiny bit better, it didn't matter, basically is what I'm saying. Don't worry about the minutes. If you want to worry about anything, in my mind, the things to worry about are the lack of depth on this team, which, for a fantasy standpoint, might be a good thing in the early going, but is going to eventually wear these guys down. The Knicks reserves that got actual minutes in this game were Jericho Sims, Deuce McBride, first name Miles, and I guess you could put Cam Payne also into that ledger. But of all of these guys, like, the only one, in my opinion, that's probably going to see minutes right now is McBride. Miles put up 22 points with 4 3-pointers on 8 out of 10 shooting. Someone of my Twitter mentions was like, I can't drop him after a 22-point game. Sure you can, because you know he's not going to shoot 80% for, forget a season, probably not for a week. Even if you think he comes down to like 50% over the week on an awful, awful scheduling week for the Knicks, then he's due for a pretty poor ball game. Now, it doesn't settle every other day like that. He might have another good shooting game. But the Knicks have one game now over 5 days. You cannot hang on to your streamers on this team. Sims, McBride, Payne, whatever you tried to stream. Those, I'm guessing McBride would be about the only one that people picked. They've got to go. The 5 starters you can hang on to. And I think, you know, I know we saw Josh Hart kind of struggling during the preseason to figure out what he was going to be. He'll be fine, especially while there's no depth on this team. So I don't think you're going to get anybody panicking on Cat after a bad game. You're certainly not going to get anybody panicking on Jalen Brunson after a decent scoring game with very little else. Might you get someone panicking on OG? Probably not. It was a bad shooting game, but he's fine. And Mikal Bridges was somebody that I was avoiding anyway, so I'm just going to forget about him. I did get a question from people that are like, should I panic on Mikal Bridges? Guys, we talked about this during the preseason. Mikal Bridges was not a target. I'm very worried that he goes to being some sort of weird in-between of Phoenix Bridges and Brooklyn Bridges. Remember? I said those almost exact words, and then I giggled at myself for saying Brooklyn Bridges like an idiot. He's going to score, I think, more than Phoenix, less than Brooklyn. I think the efficiency is going to be somewhere in between. The defensive stats, I don't know, like, what do we think? Somewhere in between? Like, a lot of in-betweens is not necessarily a great thing for him. He'll be fine. He's also one of the most durable players in the entire league. But heaven forbid something did happen to him. Like, the only way he gets to his marks, I think, this year is with health. the guy that I'm looking at on this team right now is Josh Hart. I think you could probably get him relatively cheap. He was likely drafted fairly late in your fantasy leagues. But I think he's going to have an okay job with this team because Cat's kind of the only rebounder out there. So Hart is going to have plenty of opportunities to grab boards, provided they play a team that misses shots. Celtics didn't miss. I mean, frankly, the Knicks didn't miss either. New York shot 55% and lost by 20-plus points. Again, you're not going to be able to do like a buy low on Josh Hart because what the hell even is a buy low on Josh Hart? Somebody probably drafted him around 110, 115. Maybe after this ball game, they might flip him for whoever you drafted around 115, 120. Unless the guy you have, you really do like all that much more. Meanwhile, over on the Boston side, the records are being shattered. Celtics hit 29 three-pointers. We'll just break it down for you. Tatum hit 8. Derek White hit 6. Jaylen Brown hit 5. Drew Holiday hit 4. Al Horford hit 3. Sam Hauser hit 2. Peyton Pritchard hit 1. Almost a full 1 through 8. They were missing somebody to hit 7. The whole thing fell apart because we didn't have a 7. Damn it. The real problem is that Tatum hit his 8th. If he had just stayed at 7 three-pointers and we could have had a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that would have been great. For no reason at all. Look, it's not going to be this good every ball game. But Boston was a team that, by and large, we were targeting a lot of these guys. Not Jaylen Brown so much, who had a pretty good ball game in his own right and made his free throws, which is actually kind of the biggest worry I thought for Brown coming into the year was, is that a number that would come back up where it was or stay lower like last season? Simple fact is, I didn't know. I wasn't pessimistic. I wasn't optimistic. I was right in the middle going, I like, if the bad free throw shooting is there, then all the other good stuff couldn't help him for me in Roto. He really hurt a team of mine with the free throws last year. I counted on high 70s, and he was low to mid. But Al Horford was someone we were targeting everywhere. He's the logo practically. Like if you thought the logo for the old man squad is not a real person, it's just a silhouette of a guy holding a cane and dunking a basketball. But effectively, that's Al Horford. I have him everywhere I could get him. Anytime he fell into the 120s, I took him. And this is exactly what we were trying to get out of Al Horford. 11 points with 3 threes on over 50% shooting from the field. Presumably, in a lot of spots, we'd like more than 3 rebounds, but he got 5 assists. So maybe flip those most of the time for the more expected line of like 5 boards, 3 assists. 1 steal, 1 block, no turnovers, didn't take any free throws. This line, believe it or not, was the 5th best fantasy line on the night because he was just a positive in practically everything except rebounds. Scoring. No, not a positive in scoring either. Sorry. Everything else. 7 category positive. Pretty good. In any event, Drew Holiday looked good. I think he's going to have a decent season. I liked him around 75. Derek White was a target in the 4th round. You guys saw that. I put him on a lot of the, who are my favorites in the middle of each round. Derek White was constantly the middle of the 4th round selection because there was no reason to think he was going to be any worse than last year, especially with Porzingis out, and gets off to a hot start. And then Tatum, figure he was going to do more this season with Porzingis out for half the year. I think I had him at number 11 on my board, and you can look at the buckets. I've got all those buckets right out there for everybody to see. I don't plan on touching that anytime soon, so hopefully that'll remain sort of a monolith of days gone by. And these guys are all going to cool off, but enjoy day 1. Celtics did what they needed to do, and I don't know why people were telling me I needed to be higher on Peyton Pritchard. I don't think that that's actually the case. He'll be fine. He'll be an okay schedule streaming type of guy, but that'll probably be about it. Lakers and Timberwolves. Lakers looked really, really good in their opener and couldn't hit a shot to save their lives. This was, from a reality standpoint, a very ugly performance from the Timberwolves and a pretty ugly performance by the Lakers. But if you dig a little deeper, let's start on the Lakers side. I'd rather start with the good and then we'll go to the bad because the Wolves did not look good last night. This is a ball game that I made sure I watched every second of because I wanted I'm going to be doing some mild Lakers coverage this year. There's a chance I might launch my Lakers podcast this season. We'll see how that goes. It'll depend a bit on how much fantasy stuff I'm able to jam in every day. But first of all, Lakers starting five, they're going to log good minutes. LeBron, 34, right out of the chute. I think they'd like to try to keep him in that range, if at all possible. D'Lo, 34. He wasn't shooting well, or he may actually see another minute or two on top of that. They tried a little extra Gabe Vincent and running a little bigger at times because of the opponent. Wolves are a better rebounding, bigger team. If D'Lo's hot, which he will be, then you'll just see a little bit more of him. I think he became a little bashful about his shot late in this one because the threes weren't dropping. And he had open looks, and they will drop because he's a very good three-point shooter. So don't worry about D'Angelo Russell. You're not going to be able to buy low on him either after one subpar ball game. I liked the 2 steals. I liked the 5 assists, even though, again, his team couldn't shoot. This was a really nice example. Forget the fact that Anthony Davis had a otherworldly line, 36, 16, 4 with a steal, 3 blocks, and just cashing in by abusing Julius Randle at times and even Gobert for stretches. Forget about Anthony Davis. You guys know, I know, he is. You can look at the buckets. It's all right there. It's nice to have those sitting out in the open here for the first time this season. After Jokic, Wemby, Doncic, and Shea, Anthony Davis was in bucket 3 for me all by himself. I had him above everyone else on the board. Now, obviously, we just need him to stay healthy. But I want to focus on the other stuff here. First of all, LeBron, he looked like an old guy kind of easing into the season. He'll be fine. Hit a dagger 3 late. Still managed to put up an okay line on a down night. Reeves couldn't hit a 3-pointer, but did the other stuff they wanted. Loved the hustle from Austin on the glass and on defense. That was a nice step up for him. And then Rui Hachimura, who is unquestionably an ad. He should have been drafted, but he's an ad if he wasn't drafted, at least as long as Jared Vanderbilt is out. Trying to figure out where the hell I had Hachimura on the buckets. Where's Rui? Did I forget to put him on there? Oh, no, there he is. In 25. He's bucket 25 with Josh Hart and Marcus Smart and guys like that. So, yeah, he was on the draft board for me. I feel better about that. I thought I left him off for a second and I got nervous. Rui's definitely belongs on rosters. And just overall, getting what the Lakers did here with JJ Redick reminded me a lot of what happened with the Kings when they got rid of Luke Walton. Darvin Ham being the proper equivalent there. Bringing in Redick is fine. I don't think JJ Redick is going to be like the world's greatest head coach. I'm sure he's going to be fine. But his willingness to explore is going to be very helpful for this team. And more than anything, his willingness or his flexibility that Darvin Ham and his coaching staff simply did not have is the biggest change for the Lakers this year. And if you're thinking, like, what do vibes actually mean? The vibes are good with this club. Contrary to what a lot of Lakers Twitter would have you believe. Oh, they didn't add anybody. They didn't swing any big trades. The vibes are good because Ham and company are gone. They're never going to say that out loud. I can because I'm some dumb fantasy analyst that, a few thousand people are paying attention to, not the actual large NBA public. I can say this crap and nobody cares. But I think you all know I'm right. Darvin Ham, just by being there, even if he literally did nothing, was keeping the Lakers down because they just were tired of it. They probably should have made a change mid-season, but I think they wanted to make sure they got a guy that fit what they were trying to do. So they got, friend of LeBron, blah, blah, blah. They're doing better things. They're running more offense. They're more free and open. They're laughing. They're having fun. And yes, LeBron and Bronny did share the court together for 2 minutes and 41 seconds, and it didn't go all that great. I think they lost half of their lead, and you probably won't see a much of Bronny James again until the Lakers are in a blowout. Defensively, the Lakers, I thought, were also pretty darn good as well. The effort was just better than last season. And again, I think a lot of that, it's not the personnel, it's basically the same dudes out there. It's just energy and desire. So I think overall good news for the Lakers. Everything that I saw in that game was a positive. They only hit 5 3-pointers. They shot something like 5 for 27 or something like that from downtown. I don't have the number in front of me right now. That'll get better. And then so will they. But Laker fans, don't celebrate too early. The problem, as I see it, is that I don't think the Wolves are going to be very good at the beginning of this year, at the very least. They might figure it out as the year goes. I would trust in Chris Finch. I would trust in just the guys there to get it together. But day one of the Randall Gobert frontcourt experiment was a pretty ugly one, where, they made their runs here and there. The plus minus of guys doesn't really tell the whole story. They were a -10 when Rudy Gobert was on the court. Anthony Edwards was a 0 when he was out there for 41 minutes. But, some of that was like Ant was on the court and they fell behind by 9. Then he was on the court and they made a 9-point run. It wasn't as obvious as like, oh, every time Ant was on the court, they just held steady. And then every time he walked away, they dropped. It wasn't that clear. Like, look at the other side. The Lakers were a +1 with Anthony Davis on the court. You don't think he was the most impactful Laker in that game? It just had to do with when little runs happen. So don't read too much into that plus-minus stuff. Other than Mike Conley, who looked very, very old last night. And between Conley looking super old, and by the way, I think he'll be fine. He's not going to be as good as last year. I know they were talking about sort of trimming his minutes a little bit, but it's not going to be this bad. In fact, I think they kind of need him more than ever, because this team is going to need direction on offense. And yesterday, nothing was working. So Chris Finch just tried pushing a bunch of buttons. Here's my takeaways from Minnesota. First of all, Rudy Gobert, fine. Don't worry about him. Anthony Edwards, fine. Don't worry about him. He took 25 shots. This is that a first round type of line? 27, 6, and 3 with 5 threes. That part is, but 0 steals, 0 blocks, bad percentages, 4 turnovers. I don't think he's going to be a first rounder this year, guys. I have bad news for you. And then Randall will be fine. Like, this is Julius. Points, boards, assists. The field goal percent was fine. The free throw is not going to be great. Turnovers are probably not going to be outstanding either, and he doesn't hit that many 3-pointers. He's also not much of a defensive stats guy. I did not draft Randall in any 9-category leagues. I think he was going about where he belonged for 8-cat. And I get it. You might be like, oh, I'm punting turnover, so I treat it like 8-cat. Well, okay, whatever. So don't worry about those guys. No real valuation changes there. The things that I was looking for were, one, Conley, who looked bad. I'm giving Conley at least 2 weeks untouched on the rosters where I have him, and I have him in probably like 2 spots. Other people took him before I did, in kind of an odd twist. I'm giving him at least 6 or 7 ball games before I make any kind of judgment on what his season is going to look like. There were a couple, I thought, of good things on the Minnesota side. Not a ton. By the way, Jaden McDaniels foul trouble, if you're wondering why he only played 16 minutes. Donte DiVincenzo logging 31 and a half minutes in his first game with the Wolves. I thought that was a really good sign. He had 10 points, 2 steals, 2 threes, 3 boards, 3 assists on bad shooting numbers. And, of course, he is a bad field goal free throw guy, so those are not going to magically get a ton better, but he's not going to shoot 27% from the field, and he's not going to shoot 50% at the free throw line. This was, I thought, a really good sign for Donte in just the opportunity standpoint. 11 shots in 31 minutes would get him inside the top 100. Not by a lot, but by enough to justify a draft pick outside the top 100. So if you have someone that you drafted in and I don't know who that would be because we're only 2 games into the season, it might be an easier thing to pull off tonight. Let's say you drafted someone at like $135 and they have a decent first game or a better first game than DiVincenzo. That might be your very early 1-game sample size, quick flip, try to go get Donte. I think you'd be an interesting buy low target before Minnesota plays their next ball game. Because if he gets 31 minutes again, against a team that doesn't have Anthony Davis swallowing people near the rim, then it might be too late, because he looks like someone who could break out a little bit there. And then Naz Reid got 26.5 minutes. He only took 8 shots. I'd like to see that number a little bit higher, but to be fair, the pace in this game was not super high. I guess it was normal, but not. It was not happening super fast, especially on the Wolves side. There was a lot of walking. There was a lot of ball pounding into the pavement, and this is part of the fear with Julius Randle in town. But Naz had 12 points, 4 boards, and assists. Usually he'll get a defensive stat in 26 minutes. I was fine with this. I still think Naz Reid is a good grab. He's another dude I would think about trying to target if we have an opportunity to do a little buy early on in the season, but it's possible that just doesn't really work out. I wanted to try one other very fast segment here, and this might be something that I push towards the beginning of our recap shows, but I'm going to do it at the end of this one because I forgot. Then I want to make an excuse like, oh yeah, this is definitely something I want to do at the end. This is and this is the tweet that I put out, so another reason for you guys to follow me over at Dan Vespris. But I'm doing a top 5 fantasy stories of the night, and I think it makes sense to throw that in the podcast. So, from yesterday, it has to be condensed a little because from yesterday, I shouldn't say condensed. It is a condensed card, so it's kind of pulling apart these games to find more stuff. But number 5, the Lakers offense, I thought, looked substantially improved yesterday. Better flow, better ball movement, better spacing. That's a good sign if you have Lakers on fantasy for all of those guys. Number 4, Rui Hachimura was a solid play last night, and I believe he will continue to be at least while Vanderbilt is out, and you can hold past that. You don't have to pre-drop or anything to see what Rui's job looks like when Vando comes back. I think he will hurt him enough in games where the Lakers need more passing lane defense and maybe not as much size at the 4. But we'll see how that goes. Mike Conley, only 20 minutes yesterday. That's the number 3 thing on my list. Again, you drafted him. You're holding for 2 weeks, so don't get crazy. Number 2, Big Al looked great. I started to develop just the tiniest bit of fear coming into the season because he's old. And you never know when the old is going to be too old, but he looked just the right amount of old last night. And then the number 1 thing on my list we just talked about, Donte DiVincenzo, 31 minutes in his Wolves debut. I loved everything about that. Shout out to Eric Ong at Rotomancer for having Donte as one of his prime targets on our show leading up to the season. I think he's primed to do better than what we saw last night, especially if the minutes hold steady. Coming up in not that long, I'm not even going to wait until the afternoon. I'm basically going to record 2 shows back to back. Coming up on the next show, so stay with us here. That'll be coming up very shortly. We'll be taking a long look at what's coming up tonight, the first big Wednesday of the NBA campaign. It's a 10-game slate. We got a lot of stuff to watch for. I put all of it out on Twitter already. We'll talk a little bit of streamy stuff, not a ton, because it's a big card. I don't think you really need to make moves today, except if you're getting off of a New York Knick. We talked about that on our weekly preview show, so I don't really want to repeat myself too much. And we'll talk a little bit about some injury stuff as well. So we'll get some what we call the burger board. The burger board, also known as the injury replacement board. That'll be coming up here on show number 2. I'm Dan Vespris. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for all your likes, your subscriptions, your 5-star reviews, your follows on social. Yeah, hugs and kisses, everybody. I'll see you guys in just a little bit. See you long for now.